What's up, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Joel Riley Factor. It's actually been a little bit of a rough morning. I spent all day yesterday sanding down the passenger side fender to the Chevelle, and I was going to do a tutorial today on how to do patch panels, how to pull some dents, that kind of stuff. And I actually spent most of the morning filming the tutorial, and I got about halfway through and I realized that that fender was just way too far gone. It was going to be a lot of work, it was going to be a lot of time, I was going to have to custom make every single panel. I just don't have the time to do that kind of stuff, so we're going to go ahead and just order some new fenders. Actually both driver and passenger side fenders. Going to do a whole new front clip, and we're even doing an SS hood. But so as not to rob you guys of content, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do some work on the factory Malibu hood. I've already gone along and did some sandblasting on the edges and inside these vent areas right in here. It's actually looking pretty good. I know that I've already sanded this hood down once, so I know what's underneath, I know it's in good shape, so it's going to be a good tutorial on showing you guys how to block sand, how to prep some primer, how to mix primer. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, as I was saying, since the tutorial on the passenger side fender for the Chevelle was an epic fail for me this morning, we're just going to go ahead and work on the hood. I'm going to show you guys how to prep a panel for primer. Say that 5 times fast. Prep a panel for primer. Prep a panel. Prep a primer for panel. Peter Pan peanut butter. As I was saying, prep a panel for primer. That's what we're going to be working on today. This hood is in really good shape, so it should be a fun, easy tutorial. Let's get going. First off, we're going to go ahead and sand the whole thing down with 80 grit on a DA sander. You guys are going to watch me do all the hard work on a time-lapse video, so let's get going. Alright guys, just taking a break here. I've been sanding on the hood for about the past 3.5 hours. Just non-stop, just going all out. Cranked up some Savage Garden in my headphones, and I sanded, and I sanded, and I sanded. I started out with 40 grit on the Mud Hog DA sander, and then moved over to some 80 grit on the regular DA sander. And the garage is pure carnage right now. There is so much dust and material on the ground, but the hood's in good shape. Which arm hurts when you're about to have a heart attack? Let's get back to it. Let's check out the damage. So as you can see, the hood itself is in pretty good shape. Most of this isn't dents. Those are just kind of scratch marks from the 40 grit on the Mud Hog. Got a little crazy with it, but overall, I mean, for bare metal, she's in really good shape. So I think we'll be able to kind of prep a few spots, and then we'll go ahead and put some wax and grease remover down, and then we'll shoot some primer. I'm going to go ahead and point something out to you guys that I like to do. It's kind of a personal preference thing, but the reason why I like to go ahead and just sand a panel down or a car down completely down to bare metal is it's kind of like a blank canvas. Cars and restoration are a piece of artwork, and your artwork represents who you are and what you do. And when you go out of your way to really make sure that any old paint and old damage is all cleaned up underneath the surface, you are setting yourself up for success and not failure. There's a good chance that that old paint could lift after you lay down your base coat and your clear coat, and then you got to completely sand the whole thing down and start over. So all along on the inside of these vents here, they're all completely sanded through. I actually used my media blaster on those, and then I went and buzzed back over it with some 80 grit on the DA sander. Then I kind of did the same thing along the sides of the hood here. You can see where there's still a little bit of old paint in there that we need to buzz over with the DA sander, especially right there. If we can go through all these areas and get rid of this old paint, we have a less likelihood of that paint lifting. Also, I want to show off all this material on the ground of the garage right now. This is all from the hood. Just completely destroyed my garage. Gonna take some time and clean this up a little bit before we continue on. Good morning, everyone. I actually ended up calling it a day yesterday after I got the garage all cleaned up. It was getting pretty late in the afternoon, and my wife was getting ready to get off work, and I usually like to spend time with her when she gets off work, so I called it a day, but we're going to pick up where we left off. I actually made a rookie mistake last night as well. While putting the hood away for the night, I grabbed it with bare hands and there was little rusty paw prints all over it. So don't be like me. Anytime you sand a panel down to bare metal, you always want to start using latex gloves when you're handling it. Otherwise, you're going to be like me and you're going to have rusty paw prints all over your panel. And sometimes those paw prints don't show up until after you get the paint laid down. If you actually do end up accidentally grabbing a panel with bare hands, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and grab your DA sander, sand the area down, wipe it down with wax and grease remover, and you're good to go. So the hood is actually in pretty good shape. I think we're good to go ahead and just prime it. There's a few little sand scratches here and there from the mud hog, but don't worry, I think the primer's gonna fill all that. I'm also gonna show you guys how to mix some primer, different types of primer, and mixing ratios, all that fun stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, as you can see here, we have a couple different primers to choose from. One is a 2K epoxy primer sealer. One is just kind of a Euro classic primer. One of the most common misconceptions about primer is that you have to use a self-etching primer on bare metal. I've actually had a few, well, let's not call them arguments, intelligent conversations with some of my followers on TikTok. Me personally, I prefer a 2K epoxy primer sealer as my first prime on a vehicle instead of a self-etching primer. One of the main reasons why is because an epoxy primer sealer will seal out any kind of old paint. I do agree that a self-etching primer is good for bare metal, but here's the main thing. Anytime you go to sand down a vehicle down to bare metal, no matter how much you sand on it, there's still going to be microscopic layers of the original paint still embedded into the metal. Self-etching primer is not going to seal out those layers and could potentially lift later in your paint job. However, a 2K epoxy primer sealer will eliminate that possibility. Not only is a 2K epoxy primer a good strong foundation for your paint job, it'll seal out any of that old paint and it'll create a sturdy base and it'll hold your paint job and it'll last longer. So this is actually the product we're going to be using today on the hood of the Chevelle. We're just going to do maybe 1 to 2 layers of it. You don't really need a whole lot. This stuff is pretty strong and it'll also seal out any kind of little spots that I may have missed on the original paint job that still may be on it. After we lay down our initial layers of our 2K epoxy primer sealer, we're going to let it cure for a while, anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. After we get done blocking out our initial layers of our 2K epoxy primer sealer, every single layer after that is going to be the Euro Classic primer, mostly because it cures faster, it sands smoother, and it'll still provide a nice finish. Alright, now let's talk about the most confusing part of mixing primer, paint, and all that fun stuff. Mixing ratios. I recently did a paint tutorial on my TikTok series. All I did was really paint a flat piece of sheet metal and I put in all the mixing ratios for my primers and my paints, and it seems like a lot of my followers got confused. So we're going to kind of slow down. I'm going to show you guys how to mix these ratios on these primers so you can use them on your projects at home. Some of you may have already noticed that I use Transtar on a lot of my products and a lot of my pieces for the Chevelle so far. The reason why I use Transtar so much is because I personally believe that they provide the best balance of a good quality product at an affordable price, especially for the hobbyist. They are also really user friendly. If you get confused, if you throw all your paint cans and stuff in a box and you get mixed up, don't worry, they have all the mixing ratios on the back of the can. Not only does it give you the mixing ratio, it also gives you the part numbers of the products you need to use to mix, so you know that you need a 7241 primer and you need the 7254 activator. Boom, they go right together like peas and carrots. Like I said, we're going to be using this 2K epoxy primer sealer, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. 1-to-1 ratio meaning 50-50 of each product. So you have your 2K epoxy primer sealer and you have your 2K activator. That means if you mix 20 fluid ounces of your 2K epoxy primer sealer, you also need 20 ounces of your activator. Usually the same place that sells all these products also sells these little measuring cups that has a series of different ratios on it. So no matter what product you're using, you should be able to find the mixing ratio on each of these cups. Let's go ahead and zoom in and I'll show you guys how to mix one of these. And as you guys can see on the side of this cup, there's a good series of different mixing ratios for any and all applications when it comes to paint and body work. We got our 1-to-1 ratio, which is what we're going to be using for our 2K epoxy primer sealer. We also got our 4-to-1 ratio here, which is what we'll be using for our Euro Classic primer when we get to that point. A 4-to-1 ratio is actually a very common ratio for when you go to lay down your base coat and your clear coat as well. Now, I'm going to show you guys a little trick I like to use when I'm mixing product. Take some masking tape and mask off the ratios on the side of the ratio you will be using. So for demonstration purposes, if I was going to mix my Euro Classic primer and my activator, which is a 4-to-1 ratio, I'm going to mask off both sides of this cup so that I don't accidentally get cross-eyed and start mixing in the wrong ratio. Now the big question is, how much product do I mix? Estimating how much product you need for your application varies based on if you're doing a hood, a fender, a door, or even a whole car body. So obviously the bigger the piece, the more product you need. Since we're using the hood of the Chevelle as an example, I would probably only need about 1/4 of a cup to do 2 to 3 coats of primer. So we're going to find about 1/4 of the way up to the cup to see it goes just about to where this first 3 is, right in here. Now when you go to mix your product, number one, you want to make sure you start with the thickest product first, which is our primer. So I'm going to fill my cup all the way up to this first 3 right here, which is in the forward column, meaning 4 parts, which is the first part of our 4-to-1 ratio. Once you've got your primer mixed up to this first 3, you're going to go ahead and pour your activator on top of it until it gets up to this next 3, which is in the 1 column, which gives us our 4-to-1 ratio. Alright, I know you guys are getting anxious to see me actually pour some product, so like I said, we're going to go ahead and do our first prime on the hood of the Chevelle using our 2K epoxy primer sealer, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. So let's get our cup turned over to that 1-to-1 side, and let's start dipping. Now I'm not going to need a whole lot of product to get 1 to 2 coats of 2K epoxy primer sealer on the hood, so I'm just going to go ahead and go to this first 2 with my primer. Therefore, by the time it's said and done, I'm going to have about 1/4 of a cup once I get the activator mixed in. We're going to go ahead and go to that first 2 there. And stop. Mix in our activator up to that next 2. Perfect. Keep in mind, guys, this measurement has to be exact. If you have too much product and not enough activator, it won't cure correctly. And vice versa, too much activator, not enough primer, and it'll actually begin to set up inside your paint gun, wreaking havoc on your finish. Got our products poured, so we're going to go ahead and start mixing with our paint stick here. Now usually you want to do this for about a minimum of 60 seconds or until you have a nice consistency on a nice steady stream coming off your paint stick. Just like that, nice steady stream. Alright guys, got my primer good and mixed right here. I want to show you guys a cool little something here. 3M actually makes these cool little disposable cups. Well, this part's not disposable, but this guy is. You can see it's nice and flexible. You can just set this right in there. And once you get your primer mixed up, just go ahead and give it another quick stir. And then also, a good tip for you guys to use at home, always use a strainer. These disposable cups actually come with a lid right here, and they have a strainer built in for demonstration purposes. Not everybody has that. So we're going to go ahead and use a strainer anyway. We're actually going to go ahead and just pour this in here. So we got our product mixed into our cup. We're also going to go ahead and throw this lid on here real quick. And this is the good thing about these disposable cups is you get them on there and there's no cleanup afterwards. It's all said and done. Once you're done spraying, all you got to do is pop this cup back out here, throw the whole thing away, and you're done cleaning up. Another cool little thing about these disposable cups is they come with these little black caps here. So you can go ahead and just pop that into your cup. And instead of stirring, you actually can sit here, you can mix it up, give it a little shake. And also another good thing is you can set it aside. So it's all airtight, and so your product won't set up because it's not exposed to oxygen anymore. And so you can just set it aside while you do your prep work. Alright, speaking of prep work, let's go ahead and get our hood ready for primer. This includes using wax and grease remover and a tack cloth. I usually use a general purpose wax and grease remover. Part number is LC756. Some pretty good stuff. You can use it on bare metal, you can use it on filler work, you can use it on primer, you can use it on almost anything. Don't be afraid to get crazy with this stuff. Give it a good wipe and then go ahead and check your wipes. As you can see, it's still pretty dirty. You're going to keep doing wax and grease remover and wiping it down until these cloths come back clean. After you guys finish with your wax and grease remover, you're going to grab one of these. It's called a tack cloth, and it works kind of the same way. You want to go over your whole panel with your tack cloth. You want to get every little crevice, every little single spot that you can see, because not only does this tack cloth promote adhesion, it's also getting a lot of the stuff that your wax and grease remover can't get. There we go, that looks pretty good. Now that the surface is completely clean, you got to make sure you really do not touch this again with your bare hands, because it will defeat the purpose of everything you just did. Also, before you go to spray anything, whether it's primer, paint, clear coat, it doesn't matter. Always plan out your spray pattern, meaning which parts of the vehicle or panel you want to start with while spraying. I personally like to start with the hard to reach areas, so I'm actually going to come along the side here. I'm going to spray along the side of the jamb of the hood, then the front part along that side, and then on this back side. Also, I want to point one more thing out to you guys. We're in a garage. We're not in a well-ventilated area like a paint booth. It doesn't really matter whether you're in a well-ventilated area, if you're outside or in a paint booth or in a garage, always wear your respirator. If you don't wear a respirator, you're going to start getting dizzy, you're going to start hallucinating, you might crap your pants and forget who you are for 20 minutes. Wear your respirator. All right, I think we're pretty much ready. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's go ahead and lay down some primer. Alright everyone, as you can see the priming is now done. I got the curing lamps on it right now. It actually turned out pretty good. I only had to do one coat of the epoxy primer. Came out really nice. There's a couple little dents and dings in here that we'll have to fix eventually when we go to block it out. That's not a big deal. Looks good for right now. Let's go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look here. As you can see, the epoxy primer provides a nice foundation and a nice finish for your first prime. It's going to be a little bit harder. Oh, there's a little bit of a ding right there. You guys can kind of see it. But all that's going to get blocked out eventually. We'll go over that with some glaze. But overall, the hood's in pretty good shape. We'll go ahead and let it cure for the next 24 to 48 hours, and then I'll do a tutorial on how to block it out. Anyways, that's all the time we have for today, guys. If you have any questions on a project of your own, if you need help on patch panels, priming, painting, don't be afraid to hit me up on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. I'm an open book, and all I want to do is teach you guys how to get the projects in your garage done. So if you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to hit me up on any of my social media platforms. Appreciate you guys watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe. You guys take care. We'll see you next week.